Tom had been hunting the same ridge in northern Michigan for 11 years. He knew every deer trail, every creek bed, every fallen log on that mountain better than he knew his own backyard. So when he says something felt wrong that morning, you have to understand. This was a man who did not spook easily. It was late October, opening week of rifle season. Tom left his truck before sunrise, hiked 40 minutes up a logging trail, and settled into his usual spot. A natural blind, formed by two fallen pines, overlooking a wide clearing where deer liked to feed at first light. The forest was dead quiet. No birds, no wind. Tom said later that he remembers thinking it was almost too quiet, but he brushed it off. Cold mornings do that sometimes, he told himself. Everything just waits. He settled in, breathed slow, and watched the tree line for movement. That's when he noticed it. Across the clearing, maybe 80 yards out, standing perfectly still between two birch trees. A shape, upright, too tall to be a deer, too still to be a person. Tom raised his binoculars, hands steady out of 11 years of habit. What he saw made his stomach drop. It was shaped like a man, but it was wrong. The proportions were off. Arms too long, torso too narrow. And it was tall, taller than any person had a right to be, easily 6.5 feet, maybe closer to 7. It stood at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by the birch trunks, not moving, not even swaying with the breeze. Tom lowered the binoculars and blinked hard, the way you do when you think your eyes are playing tricks. When he looked again, it was gone, not walked away, not ducked behind a tree. Gone. Vanished in the 2 seconds it took him to blink. He told himself it was a trick of the light. Shadows do strange things in the early morning, especially with fog rolling low across a clearing. He tried to settle back into his hunt, but his hands weren't steady anymore. 20 minutes passed. Tom kept glancing at the birch trees, unable to help himself. And then he heard it. A knock, wood against wood, coming from his left, maybe 30 yards into the trees. Then another knock, further right this time, deeper in the woods. Then a third, and this one was close. Close enough that Tom could hear the vibration of it travel through the ground beneath him. Something was moving around him, circling him, and it wasn't trying to hide the fact anymore. Tom made a decision hunters are trained never to make. He left his rifle rested against the log, and he ran. He doesn't remember most of the sprint back to his truck. He remembers his lungs burning, branches tearing at his jacket, and the sound, the knocking, following him. Not chasing exactly, matching his pace. Staying just behind him, just out of sight. The whole 40-minute hike back down the mountain compressed into what felt like 10 minutes of pure adrenaline. He reached his truck, threw himself inside, and locked the doors before he'd even fully closed them. As he sat there, chest heaving, he happened to glance in his rear-view mirror. Standing at the tree line, at the exact edge of the logging road, was the shape. Full daylight now. No fog, no shadows to hide behind. It was watching the truck. Tom put the truck in reverse and didn't stop until he hit pavement 15 minutes later. He never went back for his rifle. To this day, it's still up on that ridge, resting against a fallen log, exactly where he left it. He says some hunters have gone looking for it since. None of them have found the spot. Sarah, her husband Mike, and their 2 kids were driving home from a camping trip in the Pacific Northwest when their GPS lost signal. It was late, nearly 11 at night, and Mike made the call to take a shortcut he remembered from a paper map. An old logging road that cut through the forest and would save them almost an hour. The road was narrow, unpaved, and completely swallowed by trees on both sides. No cell service, no other cars, just their headlights, cutting a tunnel through absolute darkness. About 20 minutes in, the engine sputtered. Then it died completely. Mike tried the ignition 3 times. Nothing, not even a click. They were stuck in the middle of a forest at 11 at night, with 2 kids in the back seat and 0 bars on any phone. Sarah said the kids fell asleep within minutes. which she was grateful for, because that meant they didn't see what she saw next. Mike popped the hood to check the battery using his phone flashlight. Sarah stayed in the driver's seat, watching him work through the windshield. That's when she noticed the trees on the left side of the road were moving, not swaying, bending, like something heavy was pushing through the underbrush, parallel to the car, keeping pace with absolutely nothing, because the car wasn't moving at all. She rolled down her window an inch, just enough to listen. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, deep in the brush. Not an animal's gait. Animals move in bursts, quick and light. These were heavy, even, spaced-out steps, like something walking upright, taking its time. She called out to Mike to hurry up. He said the battery looked fine. He couldn't figure out what was wrong. The footsteps stopped. And then, from somewhere in the trees behind the car, not beside it anymore, behind it, Sarah heard something that made her blood run cold. A voice, distant, distorted, but unmistakably human, calling Mike's name. Mike froze under the hood. He hadn't told anyone they'd be on this road. He hadn't seen another soul in 20 miles. Mike slammed the hood shut and got back in the car, locking the doors. Both of them sat in silence, straining to hear over the sound of their own breathing. The voice called his name again, closer this time. And this time, both of them heard it clearly enough to notice something deeply wrong. The voice wasn't quite right. The pitch would rise and fall unnaturally, like something trying to imitate a human voice, without fully understanding how one is supposed to sound. Sarah turned the key one more time, more out of desperation than hope. The engine roared to life on the first try. Mike didn't ask questions. He threw it into drive and floored it down the logging road, headlights bouncing wildly over the ruts and potholes, until they finally hit the paved highway, almost 15 minutes later. They drove straight through the night to the nearest town and didn't stop until they saw a gas station with its lights on. To this day, neither of them can explain why the car died, or why it started again the second they needed it to. A mechanic checked it 2 days later and found absolutely nothing wrong with the battery, the starter, or the electrical system. Sarah says she still thinks about that voice sometimes, how it knew Mike's name, how it was learning in real time how to say it right. Jake and his friend Derek were 3 days into a backpacking trip through a remote section of the Appalachian Trail when a storm rolled in faster than either of them expected. Rain turned to sleet, temperatures dropped fast, and with the darkness closing in, they made the decision to leave the marked trail and look for any kind of shelter. That's when they found the cabin. It sat in a small clearing, half swallowed by overgrown brush, looking like it had been abandoned for decades. No trail led to it. It wasn't on either of their maps, but the door was intact, the roof looked solid, and neither of them was in a position to be picky. Inside, it was one small room, a stone fireplace, cold and empty, a single wooden chair facing the wall, not the door, the wall, and old yellowed newspaper stuffed into the cracks of the walls for insulation. Derek got a fire going in the fireplace while Jake unrolled their sleeping bags. Neither of them noticed in that moment just how wrong the chair looked, facing a blank wall in an otherwise empty room. They didn't notice until much later that night. Jake woke up sometime after midnight to the sound of scratching. Slow, deliberate scratching, coming from directly behind the wall the chair was facing. He nudged Derek awake. Neither of them moved, listening. The scratching stopped, then started again, this time accompanied by something worse. A low, wet breathing sound, like something with damaged lungs struggling to fill them. Jake grabbed his flashlight and, against every instinct telling him not to, walked to the wall the chair faced and pressed his ear against it. The breathing stopped instantly, as if whatever it was knew it had been heard. Derek suggested they check outside, thinking maybe an animal had gotten trapped in a crawl space. Jake unlocked the door and stepped out into the freezing rain with his flashlight raised. There was no crawl space, no gap in the foundation. The wall backed directly onto solid rock. The cabin had been built into the side of the mountain itself. There was no space behind that wall for anything to be scratching from. As Jake stood there, rain soaking through his jacket, flashlight beam trembling slightly in his hand, he heard the breathing start again. Except now, it wasn't coming from inside the cabin. It was coming from directly behind him. Jake spun around, flashlight sweeping the tree line. Nothing there. Just rain, just darkness, just the wet black shapes of trees swaying in the storm. He rushed back inside and told Derek what he'd found, or rather what he hadn't found. They agreed, without much discussion, that neither of them wanted to sleep in that cabin anymore, storm or no storm. As they packed their bags in a hurry, Derek's flashlight passed over the wooden chair one more time, and that's when they both saw it. Something neither of them had noticed when they first walked in, exhausted and freezing. Carved into the back of the chair, deep gouges in the wood, were words. Rough, jagged, clearly carved by hand, over what looked like years of repetition. The same 3 words, carved dozens of times, overlapping each other. It's still watching. They didn't wait to figure out what that meant. They left the cabin in the middle of the storm, hiked through freezing rain and near zero visibility for almost 2 hours, and didn't stop until they reached a ranger station just before dawn. When Jake later tried to find the cabin's location on a map, using GPS coordinates he'd saved on his phone, the app showed nothing but unbroken forest. No structure, no clearing, nothing at all. Emily went camping alone for the first time in a state forest in upstate New York, something she'd wanted to try for years, a solo trip to prove to herself she could handle it. She picked a well-known, popular trail system, planning to hike in about 2 miles to a quiet lakeside spot she'd read about online. The hike in was uneventful, beautiful even. She set up her tent by early afternoon, cooked dinner over a small camp stove, and watched the sun set over the water, feeling proud of herself for making the trip alone. It was around 9 at night, just as she was zipping herself into her sleeping bag, that she heard it for the first time. Her name, called out from somewhere in the trees, maybe 50 yards from her tent. Emily. She sat bolt upright, heart pounding. She hadn't told anyone the exact location of her campsite, not even her family, who only knew the general area of the forest. Nobody should have known she was here, let alone known her name. She told herself it was another hiker, maybe someone lost, calling out for a friend named Emily who happened to share her name. Coincidences happen. She stayed quiet and still listening. A few minutes passed in silence. Then closer now, maybe 30 yards, the voice called again. Emily. This time, she noticed something wrong with it. The voice sounded flat, toneless, like someone reading a word off a page in a language they didn't speak, getting the sounds right, but none of the natural rhythm a real person's voice would have. She grabbed her phone. No signal, as expected 2 miles into the forest. She grabbed the small pocket knife from her pack, cold comfort, but something. The voice called her name a 3rd time. This time, from a completely different direction. Behind her tent now, not in front of it. Whatever was making that sound had moved in near total silence, covering 30 yards of forest floor without snapping a single twig. Emily didn't move. She barely breathed. She sat frozen in her sleeping bag for what felt like hours, listening to her own name being called from different points around her tent, in that same flat, wrong voice, the caller never once approaching directly, almost like it was waiting for her to answer. Around 2 a.m, the voice stopped entirely. Emily didn't sleep. She lay there, knife in hand, listening to nothing but wind and her own heartbeat until the first gray light of dawn began filtering through her tent. The moment it was light enough to see, she packed her entire campsite in under 10 minutes and started hiking out, faster than she'd ever hiked in her life. About halfway back to the trailhead, she stopped to catch her breath and happened to look down at the muddy trail beneath her feet. There were footprints, bare footprints, human-shaped but strange. The toes slightly too long, the stride length far too wide for a person of normal height to have made comfortably. They ran parallel to the trail, weaving in and out of the tree line for the entire 2 miles back to the parking lot. Emily says she's never gone camping alone again. What still bothers her most isn't the voice or the footprints. It's something she didn't put together until she was already home, safe, replaying the night in her head. She never once told anyone out loud that her name was Emily that whole trip. Not a single soul on that trail knew her name. So whatever was out there in the dark that night, it already knew it before she ever said a word. Chris had hunted from the same elevated tree stand for 6 seasons straight, tucked 15 feet up an oak tree overlooking a dense stretch of forest in rural Arkansas. He knew that stand like an old friend, every creak in the platform, every angle of the branches around it. This particular evening, he'd climbed up around 4 p.m., planning to hunt until dark, maybe an hour past legal shooting light before climbing back down. Around 6, as the light started fading into that deep blue dusk, Chris heard something moving through the underbrush below him. Heavy steps, slow and deliberate, moving in a straight line directly toward the base of his tree. He assumed it was a deer at first, a big one given the weight in each footstep, and raised his rifle slowly, expecting a clean shot, but nothing walked into the clearing below him. The footsteps simply stopped, directly beneath his stand, hidden by the thick brush at the base of the tree. And then Chris heard something that made every hair on his body stand up. The tree stand creaked, not from wind, from weight, as if something below had just gripped one of the support legs. Chris froze, rifle across his lap, straining his eyes into the brush below. He couldn't see through the thick undergrowth, but he could hear breathing now. Slow, deep, rhythmic breathing, far too heavy to belong to any deer or bear he'd ever encountered in 6 years on that land. The stand creaked again and again. A slow rhythmic pressure, like something climbing the support legs, one careful movement at a time. Chris did the only thing he could think to do. He turned on his flashlight and aimed it straight down through the gap in the platform boards. The beam caught something that made his stomach turn to ice. A hand, or something shaped like one. Pale, elongated fingers, easily twice the length they should have been, gripping the wooden support leg roughly 6 feet below him. The moment the light hit it, the hand released, and Chris heard something crash away through the underbrush at a speed that didn't seem physically possible for anything that size, branches snapping violently in every direction as it retreated. Chris sat in that stand for nearly 45 minutes without moving a muscle, rifle raised, flashlight off, listening to absolute silence return to the forest around him. When he finally worked up the nerve to climb down, what he found at the base of the tree made him wish he'd never looked. Twist. Deep gouges were cut into the support legs of his tree stand. Long, parallel claw marks raked into solid treated lumber. The kind of marks that would require immense strength to leave in wood that dense. But it was what he found a few feet away, at the base of a neighboring tree, that he still can't fully explain. A single handprint, pressed into the bark itself, not carved, not scratched, pressed like the tree had been soft as clay when it was made. 5 fingers, each one nearly 10 inches long, with the palm print sunk almost half an inch into solid oak. Chris took a photo of it that night with his phone before hiking out in the dark, moving faster than he ever had on that trail, rifle held ready the entire way back to his truck. He never went back to that tree stand. He gave up that entire hunting lease the following season, despite having held it for over a decade. When he showed the photo to a longtime friend who'd also hunted that land for years, The friend went quiet for a long moment before finally speaking. He said Chris wasn't the first person to find a print like that on that ridge. He just might be the first one who lived to talk about it afterward. If you camp, if you hunt, if you hike alone through places where the cell signal drops and the trees close in overhead, maybe keep one ear open tonight. If this one got under your skin, make sure you are subscribed, because there are a lot more stories exactly like these waiting for you. Stay safe out there, and stay out of the woods after dark.